Watch right now on the Front News Project. The Crimean Bridge, powerful explosions, Crimea is coming home. The Ukrainian Pautida from the SBU destroys more than 40 enemy aircraft. Exclusive details of a unique special operation. The enemy is launching an assault on the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. A report from the very heart of the war. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch it right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko here with you. For the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then, let's begin. And we're starting right away with exclusive material. The security service of Ukraine has carried out one of the largest covert operations of the war, attacking Russian airfields with kamikaze drones as part of a special operation codenamed Web. According to a representative of Ukrainian intelligence, who wished to remain anonymous, the operation was made possible thanks to a unique scheme for delivering drones into enemy territory. Putin and all his military commanders will remember this Web forever. All the details are coming up next.
34% of strategic cruise missile carriers have been hit, specifically 41 Russian aircraft. Russia has suffered losses of about $7 billion. These are the results of the now well-known SBU Special Operation Web. And that's official.
This is what the Belaya airfield looks like now. Strategic enemy aviation.
SBU drones struck targets at 4 Russian military airfields at once: Belaya, Diaghilevo, Olenya, and Ivanovo. The operation itself was prepared for a year and a half, and the preparation was worth it. Among the targets hit were A-50, Tu-95, Tu-22M3, and Tu-160 aircraft. In addition to significant material losses, the Russians also lost their reputation. On top of that, the SBU operatives also mocked the Russian special services.
The most interesting part, and this can already be said publicly, the office for our operation on Russian territory was located directly next to the FSB headquarters in one of their regions.
According to the security service, the Ukrainian agents have already returned to Ukrainian territory. But the Russians started a manhunt and even put out a wanted notice for a native of Ukraine who allegedly owned the 4 trucks from which the drones were launched. As for the UAVs themselves, during the operation, the SBU used 117 drones. The cost of one is up to $1,000. And that's even a stretch. Russian losses amount to about $7 billion. No other operation has ever seen such a gap in cost. There has never been such a rout either.
When people talk about the numbers, 2 billion or 7 billion, it still depends on whether or not the missiles those bombers were equipped with are included. But this figure is kind of, it's rather conditional, because for Russia, these bombers are priceless. At the beginning, according to this new balance, there were, I think, 60 Tu-95s, about 20 or 25 Tu-160s, and 47, I believe, Tu-22M3s. Well, something like that. In total, that's about 120 aircraft altogether. In reality, what is actually on the wing, what is flying, what can be operated, is significantly less.
Russia will no longer be able to replenish its losses, and the reason is simple. Production of these aircraft was halted back in the 90s. During this time, the occupiers tried to create new bombers, but to no avail. You might think, what's so difficult about just resuming production? But it doesn't work that way.
Right now, they can't do anything with this whole setup. For more than 3 years now, 4 Tu-160 aircraft have been undergoing modernization, but the technology for manufacturing, for example, the titanium fuselage, has been lost. Well, there's a very large fuselage beam there. It runs almost the entire length of the aircraft and supports all the main components. These technologies have already been lost. The people who knew how to work with titanium, who knew how to process it, are no longer around.
What to do with the remaining ones is also a mystery. The Russians don't even know where to hide them.
You see, for them, this is now an extremely difficult task. They've supposedly risen from their knees and started flying. So they kept flying and flying until they had to land somewhere, refuel, because they can't fly for that long. They just don't have enough. You can't fly for a whole day anymore. So where do they put them? They only have a few airfields left in the European part that can accommodate them. Well, there's still Vorkuta, yes, that's a Soviet airfield. After one of our attacks on Engels, they moved there for a while, but something didn't suit them, so they left. Should they fly to the Ukrainka base? Well, what's the difference between Ukrainka and Belaya? Ukrainka is 8,000 kilometers from us, and Belaya is 4,500 kilometers.
As for the attack itself, it was especially painful for the Russians to lose a Tu-95. There weren't many of them to begin with, and now there are significantly fewer. And this is extremely painful for the occupiers. After all, these strategic bombers carry fairly new Russian missiles.
Even though they are the oldest among all this arsenal, for them it is the most significant, because they are the actual carriers of the Kh-101 missiles. The Kh-101 missile, unlike the aircraft, is quite modern, quite adequate, successful, and probably in this class of missiles, I wouldn't hesitate to say that it probably holds first place. The fact that we shoot them down so effectively is our achievement. It's not due to the Russians' lack of capability.
And that's not even mentioning the hit on the unique Russian long-range radar detection aircraft, the A-50. There are only about 5 of them in total. Previously, they had already become a target for Ukraine, and successfully so. Now the Russians have lost another one. It is also impossible for them to replenish their stock. Thus, a single SPU attack deprived not only Russia of air power, but also of its eyes.
And now let's move to the much-suffering Pokrovsk direction of the front. The enemy continues its military terror. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian invaders made 23 attempts to push our defenders from their positions near the settlements of Poltavka, Mirolyubivka, Yelizavetivka, Malinivka, Lisivka, Dakinska, Udachna, Novosergeyivka, Muravka, and Pokrovsk. The defense forces are holding back the onslaught and have already repelled 17 enemy attacks. 5 clashes are still ongoing. The enemy carried out an airstrike on Mirolyubivka. Meanwhile, the command of the Russian army's Kursk group of forces continues to make significant efforts to expand the so-called buffer zone in the border area of Ukraine's Sumy region. In particular, in addition to the units and subunits of the 18th Motorized Rifle Division that have already been deployed in this direction, the enemy has also brought back several assault units from the 177th Separate Marine Regiment. They are already actively participating in offensive assault operations in the directions of Konstantinovka, Kondratovka, and Vladimirovka, Alexievka. Our journalists will provide more details about the situation in the Sumy region.
Russia continues its offensive in the Sumy region. The occupiers are trying to break through certain sections of the front. According to statements by the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service, Andriy Demchenko, the situation in the region is tense, especially along the borders of the Khotin and Yunakivka districts. However, there is no evidence of a massive offensive by Russia. The enemy is advancing in small assault groups, losing hundreds of soldiers daily, including due to the continued presence of a Ukrainian armed forces bridgehead in the Kursk region.
The enemy is trying by any means to push us out of Russian territory, but we have good operational positions, and most importantly, we are using them to destroy large enemy forces. And it is very important that these are professional forces. As a rule, in other sectors, most of the enemy troops are conscripts. In other words, what we call cannon fodder. But here, we are facing airborne troops, naval infantry, air assault units, and a parachute regiment. In other words, some of them have been preparing for a long time to carry out such operations.
Also, according to the military, the enemy, likely assessing its prospects, is hardly using any armored vehicles in the Sumy direction. The most the command is deploying is light motor vehicles. This allows for somewhat faster movement across open terrain, but it does not have a decisive impact.
The Russians continue their strategic offensive operation. And when analysts talk about whether the enemy's advance has increased or decreased, it has increased. This is due essentially to the fact that in recent weeks, the Russians have achieved one such non-strategic but operational success. This is the breakthrough of our defenses by forces up to a division in strength between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, reaching the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka highway.
However, having penetrated our defenses, the Russian Federation is constantly subjected to flanking attacks, which allows us to effectively destroy the enemy and regularly replenish our exchange fund. For example, in the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces have repelled more than 50 assaults here.
I wouldn't say this is a major offensive, but it is certainly enough to draw serious attention from the Ukrainian defense. The Russians have assembled what they call the northern grouping of forces in this area. Essentially, they have moved in from the Kursk region.
To minimize civilian casualties, Ukraine was forced to announce an evacuation from areas near the border. The authorities explained to locals, this doesn't mean your home will be occupied, it's just becoming too dangerous there. At the moment, there are 213 such settlements.
Can I go now?
Sit her down over there.
Sadai, we will help.
Garden. So.
That's it. It's over.
By the way, Ukraine is thwarting the Russian offensive not only through actions on the front lines, but also behind enemy lines. Yesterday's sabotage of a railway bridge in the Kursk region and the derailment of a train in Donbas are proof of that.
So that the enemy doesn't let its guard down, under occupied Melitopol, Ukrainian Special Services, specifically, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, derailed a freight train carrying shells and ammunition. Strikes continue to be carried out. Over the past day, there were strikes on Olhov, strikes on the Kursk region of the Russian Federation, in order to prevent the enemy from regrouping, supporting their own logistics, delivering ammunition and personnel to continue offensive actions in the Sumy region.
At the same time, the bravado of Russian military correspondents about their troops advancing on Sumy looks utterly absurd, according to experts. Despite minor successes in the Sumy region, the likely outcome of all these actions by the occupiers will be temporary control over a narrow strip of forest belts along the border.
Again, this is overall quite a slow, not very, so to speak, consistent, not very well coordinated offensive, the point of which, as I understand it, is to carry out Putin's order and create in the Sumy region what he called a buffer zone.
The Ukrainian side is also predicting that the Russians will not be able to reach Sumy. Currently, there is an enemy grouping of about 50,000 people in this direction. And for such grand plans, these forces are clearly insufficient.
Now, an analysis of the situation on the Huliaipole and Orikhiv fronts. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Huliaipole front, enemy aircraft carried out strikes on the areas of the settlements of Olhivske, Poltavka and Huliaipole. On the Orikhiv front, the aggressors launched airstrikes on the areas of the settlements of Orikhiv and Novoandrivka. They plant gardens under shelling, patch up roofs after strikes, and flatly refuse to leave their native Huliaipole. About 1,000 people remain in this frontline city in the Zaporizhzhia region. You won't see any intact houses on the streets anymore. Everything has been destroyed by enemy artillery and air bombs. But the biggest problem is the drones. TSN correspondent Kira Oves saw with her own eyes how the people of Huliaipole are living now.
On the street where life once bustled, there are now only ruins.
There are neighbors here and there is hail.
Here, grads hit the neighbors. By the way, you can still see the fragments sticking out over there.
How many people in total used to live on this street?
Well, there were 2 or 3 people in each house. Just imagine, it's a small street, maybe 10 or 20 houses, so about 40 people lived here at the start of the war. At the beginning of the war, there were 20 to 40 people living here.
But at this moment, Vitaly is the only resident here. On weekdays, he works at the city council, and on weekends, he goes to the safer city of Zaporizhzhia. An enemy shell could hit here at any moment. His pets warn him when danger is approaching.
I have 3 dogs, and they're like little bells because their intuition or hearing is very well developed. So, when something is about to land on our side, they hide really well, sometimes even running into the house.
Here, under constant shelling and just 7 kilometers from the occupiers, about 1,000 people live, including the Vov couple. Vasily and Vera have been married for 60 years. They do everything together, patching up holes in the windows after shelling and planting vegetables.
We're not lazy, we get things done. If something explodes, we run away, then we come back out again.
The couple's farm is small, but they do have dogs and chickens. After one of the shellings, one of the chickens got lost, but in the end, they found her. And not just her, the woman says happily.
Let them take a look at your babies. She brought 7 chicks, hid away, and we didn't even know where she was. So yesterday, Grandpa and I fenced it off, and now she's sitting here.
There hasn't been electricity or water in the city for a long time. All the utilities were destroyed by the Russians. You won't see a single surviving apartment building, says Vyacheslav, the community police officer. He says it hurts to watch the enemy destroy his hometown.
First, cluster munitions hit my apartment, damaging the windows and walls. Then a Grad rocket struck, broke through the floor slab and tore through the bedroom.
In addition to artillery and air bombs, the Russians are attacking the city with dozens of FPV drones. It's dangerous to move around the streets.
In one day, they paid for it. In one day, we counted more than 86 drones. Any vehicle that moves, if they see it, they can hit it without hesitation. That is, they don't think about who is driving there, a soldier or a civilian or a policeman or an emergency services worker or someone else. They don't care.
Every day a police officer drives around to visit elderly people and tries to persuade them to leave for safer places. But all they get in response are excuses.
You're not planning to leave Huliaipole? Where would I go and to whom? The only place I'll be leaving for is over there, to the crosses, to my wife. I've already reserved a spot there.
The police officer doesn't know what words to use to convince them. He admits that even his own father flatly refuses to leave Huliaipole.
I can't even do anything about my own father, honestly.
No. I tell him 300 times a day, leave, let me take you somewhere, I'll take you to Zaporizhia. No, I don't want to. My father also worked in the police. At the moment, he is retired.
And even though living in Huliaipole is a daily risk, the residents of the city knowingly accept it. After all, they say they believe in victory and are trying to do everything so that their city will live to see it.
Now let's analyze in detail the situation on the Kupyansk and Lyman fronts. Let's be honest, this is yet another sacred goal for Putin and his entire gang. Accordingly, the situation here is also extremely tense. On the Kupyansk front, the enemy attacked 5 times in the areas of the settlements of Stepnaya Novoselka, Peshanaya, and Zelenaya Rosha. 4 clashes are still ongoing. On the Lyman front, over the course of the day, the invading army launched 10 attacks on Ukrainian positions in the areas of Grekovka, Novy Mir, Redkodob, Karpovka, Zelenaya Dolina, Torsko, and towards Grigorievka. 3 clashes are still ongoing. Our soldiers are holding the defense steadfastly and inflicting losses on the enemy. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed one of Russia's most dangerous electronic warfare stations in the Kharkiv region. Border Guard pilots from the Phoenix unit eliminated the enemy's R-330 Zytel electronic warfare system. But there is also troubling news. The Russian occupiers have intensified their offensive on the front, and Russia has handed over tons of gold bars to an Iranian company. This is a kind of barter for military equipment. Meanwhile, North Korea has supplied Moscow with up to 9 million shells. Our journalists know all the details. The Ukrainian armed forces have successfully taken out Russia's most advanced electronic warfare system, the Borisogledsk II. Fighters from the 413th Raid Battalion detected the station and struck it from a distance of about 70 kilometers. The occupiers have said goodbye to yet another electronic warfare system. Fighters from the border unit destroyed the Russian electronic warfare system R-330 Zytel with precise strikes from kamikaze drones, which the occupiers had tried to hide among the buildings. Meanwhile, in the Russian city of Vladivostok, in the area of Desantnaya Bay, where military equipment is loaded and unloaded, explosions have occurred. Law enforcement agencies and special services quickly cordoned off the area, set up checkpoints, and temporarily suspended traffic. However, the reasons for the incident have not been disclosed.
Something was definitely happening, yes. A police car sped by, followed by 3 ambulances. Most likely it was that situation happening at Shimora. Nothing is clear, but it's very interesting.
And while the cause of the explosions is still being sought in Vladivostok, Germany has approved new military aid to Ukraine amounting to 5 billion euros, which includes funding for long-range Ukrainian-made weapons, ammunition supplies, and more.
First and foremost, this concerns Germany's funding of long-range weaponry in Ukraine. Moreover, it specifically refers to Ukrainian-developed systems. In addition, it is reported that the German side will supply Ukraine's defense forces with artillery shells, air defense systems, ground-based weaponry, small arms, and accordingly, satellite communications.
Meanwhile, against the backdrop of negotiations, Russia has intensified its offensive and achieved its most significant gains since January, according to the BBC. In particular, the article notes that the city of Rodinsky, which is 15 kilometers from Pokrovsk, is literally swarming with enemy drones. At the same time, since the beginning of the year, Russian occupiers' losses have exceeded 190,000 people.
At the moment, the Russians' tactical gains amount to about 100 square kilometers. And it should be noted that the greatest tactical successes of the Russian occupation forces were recorded in November 2024. This was an advance into Ukrainian territory covering up to 750 square kilometers. Moreover, it should be noted that in the month of April, the Russians had their smallest tactical gains.
Russia has also begun using new Danim drones against Ukraine. However, the company that once manufactured them has long since ceased to exist. In other words, the enemy does not have significant stockpiles of these targets.
This information should be treated with great caution because apparently it may actually refer to Iranian hybrids equipped with jet engines. If this information is confirmed, then it will undoubtedly indicate that the Russian Federation has acquired strike capabilities with a range of about 400 kilometers.
And Moscow transferred nearly 2 tons of gold bars to an Iranian company totaling around $104 million as payment for the Shahed 136 attack drones.
If this information is confirmed, 104 million is roughly equivalent to 2,000 to 2,500 Shaheds. For context, the Alabuga plant, which was built with the participation of Iranian specialists, currently has the capacity to produce about 10,000 Russian Jiran-2 drones. This is a copy of the Shahed 136. In other words, we're talking about the possible transfer by Iran of drones to the Russian Federation in quantities comparable to the plant's quarterly output in Yelabuga.
In addition to its cooperation with Iran, the Kremlin continues to receive weapons from North Korea. North Korea may have supplied Russia with up to 9 million artillery shells and at least 100 missiles in just the past year and a half. In exchange for this assistance, Putin gave Kim Jong-un at least one vehicle equipped with a Panzer-class air defense system.
Let me remind you, until quite recently, reports mentioned a maximum of 5 million shells that may have been supplied by North Korea. But even 5 million shells raises certain questions. But even taking into account the modernization of Rheinmetall's production and the U.S. military-industrial complex, the total number of munitions produced by the defense industries of Europe and the United States is about 1,200,000. That's why questions arise about where North Korea got 9 million shells, which they supposedly transferred to the Russian Federation.
And now we move to the Kramatorsk and Toretsk directions of the front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy assaulted the defense forces' positions towards Bilahora. Our defenders repelled 3 enemy offensive actions. In the Toretsk direction, since the beginning of the day, there have been 5 clashes in the areas of the settlements of Delivka, Klishchiivka, Toretsk, and towards Yablonivka. The defense forces repelled all enemy attacks. Instead of the old Soviet ones, there is now the modern self-propelled gun, Bohdana. In the 44th Artillery Brigade, the soldiers have been operating this system for 6 months already, have studied all its advantages, and as they say, there are quite a few. Bohdana skillfully targets both Russian equipment and personnel. In the east overall, the invaders are trying to advance in small groups, coming in on motorcycles and electric scooters. That's why the artillerymen definitely have plenty of work. TSN correspondent Kira Oves saw the features of modern equipment, the combat work, and the daily life of the soldiers of the 44th Brigade.
The gun. Fire.
It hits well, accurately. The vehicle is good, but sometimes it's afraid of the mud.
So how do you get out?
Engage all-wheel drive and off we go.
Precise and mobile. That's how the artillerymen of the 44th Brigade praise their Bohdana. It was developed in Ukraine. It's almost fully automated, equipped with a 155mm gun, and can hit targets up to 50 kilometers away.
The vehicle proves itself to be effective. All the advantages are in the fact that everything is automated. Producing our own systems and our own shells is a huge plus.
22-year-old Vitaly, with the call sign Recruit, the gun commander, says the Bohdana is a great help in repelling Russian assaults.
Right now there are very active assaults using motorcycles, so we are mostly targeting infantry. There's no equipment at the moment, no tanks, no BMPs. You don't see any of that now. There are some motorcycles and I don't know, there were even electric scooters and now they move in small groups. Before, a whole company could advance.
The occupiers attack every day, mostly when it's cloudy and very hard to spot them, the artillerymen say.
Lately, I've noticed that the enemy moves mostly when it's raining. As soon as the weather turns bad or there's fog, especially fog, the enemy immediately starts storming somewhere.
The soldiers work around the clock. They have up to 5 minutes to fire. During this time, the self-propelled gun moves to the firing position. The soldiers aim the Bohdana and load it.
1, 2, 3.
The gun crew consists of 5 soldiers. All of them have been in the army since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. They have been working together on the Bohdana for about half a year. During this time, they've become friends and set up a comfortable life at their positions. There's a summer shower here, and over there, Soldier Vassal treats everyone to his homemade dishes.
Sometimes there are pancakes, sometimes pancakes, sometimes potato pancakes, stewed meat, ragu. I do everything I can. The guys love pilaf.
The Bohdana itself is securely hidden, because the Russians are constantly trying to locate it around the clock.
The main challenge is the drones. There are drones constantly from early morning until evening. Well, during firing, if God forbid there's shelling, the gun is immediately stopped and moved into cover.
The biggest thing for us...
The greatest danger for us right now is drones Lancets. That's the biggest problem. We make nets like these and hang them on top.
The artillerymen say they're satisfied with the gun and the results of their service. The only thing they're missing is rest. They admit 30 days a year is not enough to spend time with their loved ones, but it's for their sake that they stay here at their positions. That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.